fellowship and good food. We just ask that you would bless this time and help it to edify us and build us up. In Jesus' name.
Thank you, sir. All righty. I wanted to say, I had a couple of quick announcements. I meant to do this earlier, but somehow or another I got sidetracked. This Wednesday night, first of all, this Tuesday night for the Hebrew class, we'll be meeting again. We'll be resuming that. And I think what I'm going to do for this first class as we kick this back off is go back and review some, just to kind of get everybody back and into the swing of things. And that way it gives some other folks a little bit of time to catch up. So we'll do that Tuesday night, and then the following Tuesday night we'll go on to the next lesson. So I hope that'll be agreeable to everyone. But Tuesday night at 7. Isn't that what time we've been meeting? 7? Okay. And then on Wednesday night, we're going to have our new moon service. And now Rosh Chodesh will actually begin Tuesday night, but the way we're going to do it, I talked to some people, and we decided that might be best to have our Hebrew class Tuesday night. And then Wednesday, we'll come in at 6, and we'll have our Rosh Chodesh service first. And then after the service, we'll have our community meal. So Wednesday night is new moon service, 6 o'clock. We'll have the service first, and then we'll have the community meal. And, of course, we'll be live streaming the service at 6 o'clock on Wednesday. So, and then the following month, Rosh Chodesh is going to be a bit of a challenge because Rosh Chodesh falls on Thanksgiving. I'm not certain how that's going to work, but we may have to make some adjustments there. But anyway, Tuesday night, 7, Hebrew class. Wednesday night, a Rosh Chodesh service, and then we'll do a meal following. And so I don't see Beth or Nayla or Carmen. So we just need to get with Nayla. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to get with Nayla about what we're going to do as far as, well, here she comes. Everybody stare at her. Nayla, come here. No, actually, Nayla's when we're... No, we want Nayla. Hey, I was, yeah, there you go. Hey, I need your help. Wednesday night, Wednesday night after Rosh Chodesh, as far as the community meal, I'm telling people to get with you as far as what we want to do about that. She's not even listening to me. Is this how she does at home? What did you say yes to? Italian. Okay. So Nayla has said we're going to do Italian. So they just need to get with you or what have you. But that'll be after the service on Wednesday. Okay.
Pasta or meatballs or salad.
Yeah, or anything with garlic. Okay. All right. So does everybody understand the meal is after the service? Okay. Very good. We just wanted to get that out of the way and make sure everybody knew that. Yes, ma'am. It would be posted on Jacob's Table on Facebook as far as what the theme is, and then you can go in and tell us what you're going to be bringing. That way Nayla can kind of coordinate that a little bit. All right, so let's go on. As I said this morning, there is so much in the portion called Bereshit. There's so much in the book of Genesis. It would take a lifetime to just cover all of that. I years ago when I did an audio commentary on the Torah portions, when I got to Genesis, I ended up, I think, for just the Torah portion called Genesis, I ended up doing like a 6 to 8 hour commentary. And that was scratching the surface, So there's no way that we can cover everything in the Torah portion. However, in the next hour or hour and a half, we're going to try to do our best. So anything that we discussed this morning, issues that we talked about this morning, comments, observations, questions, let's do that first. Let's try to stay on topic before we venture off into other things, if we would, please. So who's going to lead us off here? Are you kidding me? Okay, come on, Bob. Come on. We need you to speak. Your fans have been missing you for a couple of weeks since.
Hi. What you started off talking today in Genesis 2:4 was goes along with some notes that I made this morning. Question especially for you.
Okay.
The part there where it says there is no man to till the ground. Now this all took place. I'm going to say this and then jump backwards, but this all took place after the 6 days of creation and after God rested on the seventh day. That he talks about there was no man to till the garden. It
Right.
appeared in number 6 or day 6 that he had created man, but created and formed to me turn out to be two different things. Jumping back to Genesis 1:26, let me find it. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness." 127, it said, "Then God created man in his own image, and in the image of God he created him, male and female, he created them." So the question kind of goes to the timing of things, and also when he created them in day 6, was he creating their spirit versus a person that stands up and walks around? Bear it in mind.
Oh, see, you know, have you ever noticed you never see Bob and Sam Elliott in the same room? All right, now
One
we've
last little
interrupted
thing.
Bob's very serious theological question.
I like that, though. I heard of that picture a month ago, but
I know everybody started laughing. I'm like, what was so funny?
I thought they were laughing at you trying to answer my question.
I thought they were laughing at you with the question.
They're laughing at us.
Okay.
Okay.
Actually, it was your picture up there, not mine. No, let's get it back on track here.
Wow. That was good. Just to take away the potential answer of believing in a longer or an older Earth. For years and years, I believed in the gap theory. I do not believe in it. I have a lot of reasons why. So the question I'm asking is not about some lapse in time. It's simply about did God create in those first 6 days the spirit of man as he created the seeds? It talked about the seeds that he created, but it wasn't until after day 7 that it said the garden physically appeared for the man to tend, who at that point didn't also have a form himself.
I have always looked at this in very simple terms, you know, and I'm not saying this is the definitive answer, but in chapter 1, you more or less have, you know, a sequential order of, you know, let there be light, the firmament, day 3, those things, and then on day 6, you know, man is created, male and female, by the way, in his image and in his likeness. So image and likeness, you know, because the Creator is spirit, he doesn't have a similitude, you know. I would believe that to mean that in function rather than form, you know, he's saying, let's create man, you know. I know, you know, a lot of people go into the whole idea that we're a tripart being, you know, body, soul, and spirit. You know, there's the triunion of the Godhead, the Father, Son, the Spirit, and maybe there is something to that. But when it comes to his image and his likeness, I see it as the function, you know, and how, well, for instance, I said something this morning along the lines of God created everything, but then he made man. He created man, and he put man in a position to kind of sustain what he had created and to continue on with what he created. In a sense, I don't want to use the wrong words here. We work with God in his creation when we're doing it according to his purpose. So that whole idea of being conformed to the image of the Son of God goes back to this that's in Genesis chapter 1. He made us in his image and in his likeness before the fall occurred, right? After the fall, and I know I'm running around here, but I'm going to get back to the main point in just a second. After the fall, with the birth of Seth, it said that he was made in the image and likeness of Adam. So there is something to that idea that it's, in Genesis 1, that it's more than just, taking a bunch of clay and molding and shaping him, and he made him in his image and likeness in that manner. In Genesis chapter 2, I think rather than getting into the sequence of things, day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, rather than getting into the sequence of things, Genesis 2 is talking about, this is really getting into the purpose, even more specifically, the purpose of mankind. It even starts out in verse 4, this is the history. The word toledot is also the word for genealogy or generations. This is the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created. So it's about the purpose is beginning to take shape, about why the Creator put man here in the first place, why he created him in his image and likeness. Whether or not chapter 1 describes, him creating the spirit of man, and then in chapter 2 he puts the spirit of man into the form of man, I don't know. I've never really considered that, honestly. I've just always seen it as chapter 2 is describing in more detail the purpose. He's even getting into, because you mentioned there was no man to till the ground. He's explaining that in those days, Moses is looking back to help us understand some things. In those days, God hadn't caused it to rain, and there was no man to till the ground. There's a lot of things that happened before man was placed there. And so when man is the missing piece of the puzzle. So that's why we are so unique in all of God's creation, because without us here on the planet, then God's purposes for the planet really doesn't serve a purpose. So anyway, I don't know if that makes any sense. It does in my mind. Coming out of my mouth, I'm not so sure. I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted today, I have to admit. But I just feel that chapter 2 is demonstrating and explaining how important and how unique mankind is to God's creation, because it's through man that God causes all these things to serve a purpose. Without the man to till the ground, there's just things that are going to go wild, and it gets even into prophetic things, Where was I going with this? It'll come back to me in a moment. Anyway, I probably didn't answer your question at all. I'm just trying to explain how I've always, interpreted it in my mind.
You've done very well together, or holding it together today.
Well, who else? Anyone else? Nick has something back over here, William, in the corner.
I just want to go back to Sam Elliott's question. Bob's question. The Book of Jubilees talks about the creation in a different manner. It doesn't. The way I've always seen it is kind of the way Bill did. It's not chronologically placed. Chapter 1, chapter 2. It's chapter 2 going back to day 6 and giving you the genealogy, as Bill said. That's the way I've always seen it. The Book of Jubilees goes into it. What's interesting, the way the Book of Jubilees puts it, is that man was made outside of the garden. And when he was made, the days of a male had to be fulfilled, that he was purified before he could be brought into the garden. Likewise, when Eve was created, Eve had to go through the same that a female has to go through for her purification before she could be brought to the man in the garden. And Yahweh has never changed anything that we know of all the way to his creation. Everything still follows exactly as his law prescribes. So even in the way he made man, Adam didn't get a free ticket. He still had to be purified. Hawa, Eve, did not get a free ride. She had to go through the days of purification before she could come into the garden. The garden is where Yahweh walked. The garden was a chodesh. It was a holy place. And though there was no man to till the ground, Yahweh had already created, but now it needed to be tended and cultivated. And Yahweh already did his work. We're nothing but a vapor, but we're here to serve his purpose for this day in the moment that he calls us to be. And that's where we are. And that's what we're to do. The rest of the message of having our wife be our helper, everything just folded together and just melted into a nice Sunday. It was just delicious. Everything was great.
Sundae, I think it's
It was great. It was great. I really enjoyed the message today in bringing that, because there are some points of the message that I hadn't thought of. You think about these things, but then you blow it out. And this just brought things home on how am I living to my fullest expectations if I'm putting my helpmate behind me or putting my will in front of hers. And it can't work that way. And so we have to fulfill God's purposes. We have to fill his in his prescribed method, in his prescribed time. And I think the time between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 is just going back to clarify what he briefly described in Genesis 1. And that's the way I've been seeing it anyway.
Well, I just tend to think it gets more into the details of it as far as the function, not so much the form of it, which, that's the most important thing, the purpose of it. But I do want to go back to something he said to kind of reiterate, and that is, even though we're just a vapor, you can't have the earth bring forth what it's supposed to bring forth unless there's that mist coming up out of the earth to water the ground, or unless the rain is falling on the ground, and then there's that man to cultivate it. And so we cooperate with the Creator in his creation. He created it. He got everything jump-started. Everything was there that we needed to exist, to sustain life. And yet, even though he could, he nevertheless appoints mankind to do certain things. And so, I wanted to relate that to something we said earlier today. That's what the Messiah did. He did what only the Creator could do. The Word became flesh, dwelt among us, hung upon that tree, was resurrected on the third day. But then in doing that, he sends his Spirit to us and empowers and enables us to continue what he started. He didn't venture out of Jerusalem and Galilee. I think he went into the Decapolis one time perhaps, but he didn't venture very far away from that central hub of ministry. But what he did was he empowered mankind, his people, to go out and to continue his work and to cooperate with him in what his purpose was. And so I said all of that to say, going back to Genesis 2, to me, it's just describing not the order of it, the sequence of it, as much as it's the purpose of it, the squeezing, the pressing, and all those things that we identify with going through different things in life, but how that is purposeful in cooperating with the Creator to bring purpose into fruition for as many as we can come in contact with. And I do think it's interesting that what you said, that according to the book of Jubilees, at least, and there are other works that make mention of this as well, that Adam was not formed in the garden. He was formed outside of the garden, and then he was placed in the garden. Here's what that connects with in my mind. Jacob, he met his wives and had his children in Syria. Jacob and 70 souls go down into Egypt, and those 70 souls become 2 and 3 million people. the Father always forms the body outside of the holy place, so to speak, or the land, which I believe that's where the Garden of Eden was, by the way, in Jerusalem. Can I go off on a little trail here for just a second? Just had a flashback. I believe that Jerusalem and the environs in Jerusalem, that's where the garden was. I'm convinced of it beyond any doubt. And years ago, we were leading a group over, and they had put us up in this really nice hotel, and they gave the family this nice little room that had this balcony that overlooked Jerusalem, the new city and the old city. And I could look out from the balcony, and over here was the Temple Mount, and I couldn't make out the western wall, but I could just see the top of the Mount of Olives, and you could hear the prayers wafting over from the western wall. And like I said, I was convinced that that's where the midst of the garden was, specifically where the Creator walked, where the tree of life would have been. And then I looked over here, and there was just off to my right was what is called the Hill of Evil Counsel. And that's where the UN sits, by the way, in Jerusalem. No joke. That's where the UN sits. But it's called the Hill of Evil Counsel. Now, here's what's interesting. The word for counsel in Hebrew is etzah. Etzah. It's ayin zadi he. The word for tree in Hebrew is etz. So I'm thinking, tree of life, tree of evil counsel, I'm like, it's like, boom, he really brought that back to me. The point, he's forming the body again. Where? Predominantly outside of the land. In preparation for what? To take us and gather us and put us back in that land when the Messiah returns to rule and reign from Jerusalem. So you said he never changes the way he does things, and I agree 110%. He's consistent, he's constant from beginning to end. So if he formed the body back then outside of the garden, he's forming the body right now outside the garden, so to speak, outside the land. But then there's going to come a day, here's how you put it, after he had completed his purification process. If that's accurate, and I won't dispute it, but if that's accurate, then maybe that's what's going on right now with us. We're being tried, we're being tested. What did he say to Laodicea? I counsel that you would buy of me gold tried in the fire. In other words, to be purified. Not to have any dross, not to have any of those things that are imperfections, that are pollutants. So, interesting thing. Yes, Dana, and then we'll come to Chris. You know who Dana is, don't you, William? Have y'all met? Okay, all right.
No, I didn't. So, wow, I don't. You could have been in our kitchen all week, basically, based on...
But I wasn't, I promise.
No, but based on what you taught, it's just, there's so many things swirling through my head right now, but the thing that I'm seeing, and I'm thinking of Nehemiah, and how even when they began to build the wall, they started with the sheep gate, they consecrated it, and I just feel like that's what's happening corporately here. I believe it's happening around throughout the body of Christ. But I just feel like because you and Beth have been teaching order, that's why even the Lord let that. Who could have orchestrated for your son to call at that very moment, to text at that very moment? I just see how, because order is being established, now there's a place for the prodigals to come home. And, with our own son, we've been going through some very challenging times. And I think he hasn't been able to come home because there were things in our home that weren't in order. As a wife, I wasn't in my proper role, and I think my husband would agree. I'm sharing on behalf of us. I asked him first, though. I said, can I share personally? But we've had to be working through things in our own home. And so anyway, I'm saying all this to say I'm just very grateful for the way that you guys lead by example, and for the way that you're so vulnerable and you teach us how to establish order, because otherwise what are we building on? Like, so I just thank you. That's all. I just thank y'all.
Well, all I can say to that is we're sharing as we're learning. You know, it's not necessarily that, oh, we've done this and therefore now this is what you need to do. No, we're just sharing what he's dealing with us about, you know. The whole portion, Brashid, if you wanted to boil it down to a word or a phrase, maybe that would be the better way to put it, is the Creator establishing order. You know, establishing order in his creation so that it can function according to his purpose. You know, calling the light out of the darkness, separating the waters above from the waters below, gathering the seas together unto one place so that dry land can appear, so then that he can call forth the grass and the herb yielding seed, and the trees that bear fruit whose seed is in itself after its own kind, and then the sun, the moon, and the stars to cause those things that are coming forth to continue to be sustained and to grow, and on and on and on and on. So it is about him establishing order and the pattern in the beginning, and that pattern is constant, it stays true. And if we establish order in our little creation, in our little world, then all these other things that we want to see happen, they will come to fruition. But once everything is in order. And some of that ordering has to be separating and dividing. Division in the body is a dirty word. But usually, when it's a dirty word, it's because it's the division that we've created. There is the division that the Creator establishes. You know, he separates light from darkness. And so we have to follow suit. We have to be able to discern between light and darkness and know what to separate and to distinguish clean from unclean, holy from profane. So then if we start applying that pattern to our lives and our homes, husband and wife, parents and children, fellowship, you know, then all these other things that we want to see happen will fall into place. So that seems to be, in our life, that seems to be what he's doing. Some things that we wanted to see happen that had just other things that we were wanting to see happen, we realized now, we would have been in a mess if that had come first, and now we're involved with all of this. And so we say, oh, okay, that's why. Everything has to be according to the pattern, done in order. I think, you know, whatever our, you know, unique circumstances are, I think if we'll be sensitive to his voice and have the courage to put those things in order, then we're going to start seeing, dare I say, miracles occur in our lives. I really believe that. And I could go on and on too. Thank you for your words of encouragement. But I also want you all to know in no way should you think that Beth and I have got this all figured out, because we don't. All right? So just know what you're getting into here.
That's part of the beauty in it too, is that you guys are willing to teach us from a place of where you're figuring it out, and it's just beautiful.
Well, I know that Beth does, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Dana. Chris? And then I'll come over to this side.
Well, since Sam Elliott opened up the can of worms.
Man, you are not going to live that down now, Bob.
No, but it's a good question, and it's a question that I asked and was reading into this and was able to find a teacher that actually gave some wisdom into something that I hadn't understood. And so I'm going to open it up and throw it out there and see where it sticks. But in that Genesis chapter 1, verse 25, going into 26 and 27, when he's talking about creating man in our image and then create according to our likeness, and then he creates him in his image and creates them in his image. He doesn't say that he created them, though, in his likeness at that point. It's not until chapter 5 do we actually see that statement used again of likeness. And so this teacher was actually using this to demonstrate these words here of image and likeness. And the word image is Strong's 6754, which is the word zalam. I'm not good at pronouncing these, so if I'm wrong.
Salem.
Zalem, okay. And then likeness is Strong's 1823, which is demut. Am I good on that?
I'm going there. Let me.
Demut.
Okay, hold on. Yeah, well, it's a derivative of that here, but that's the root word. Yeah. Okay.
So he goes into this aspect of trying to understand these two words and why we're created in the image here, but not in the likeness here of God. He doesn't use that aspect in creating it. And so he starts off going back to Genesis 1:1, where the word created is first used, and it's the word bara, 1254. Bara. And he says, not always bara was used as the word created, but we need to look at it somewhere else to gain some context to bring it back here. So he uses 1 Samuel chapter 2 and verse 29 to give this, where the word bara is actually translated as the word fat. And so he says, is this actually then that God is fattening up the heavens, fattening up the earth in the sense? And he says, think of this in the sense of verse 2, when everything was empty and void, he was filling them up. He was bringing them to a fullness. And so perhaps that would apply in the creation aspect of bara, because in that chapter 1:25, when he's creating man, he's filling man up in his image in that sense. He's filling him up to the point of what that would look like. And so that zalam, Zal plus mem, is water and a shadow. And that we were created on as the shadow of God upon this vastness of water, because our bodies are made up of over 90% water. So we created this, we have this image or shadow of him upon us. But the demut, on the other hand, is internal. It's like it's characterized as an internal thing here. And of course, the first two letters he talks about of that word, Dalet and Mem, make up the word blood. So it gives that reflection of it being an internal process. And of course, we know in Scripture that life comes from the blood, that it's found in the blood.
Well, the word for blood is dam.
Yeah.
And so damut is more or less a plural form
Right.
of that. So speaking of, like you said, speaking of things inward, things that are internal,
yes.
yeah.
So the life of him. And so if we were made at that point in the demut, or the life of him, then would we have actually sinned? Would Adam have sinned being made in that likeness versus just his image? That was the question that he brought up. And he said that that we see this completion of this process, though, because this is a process of the demut. It's that he wasn't created there in demut. It's a process to bring us through our time that we all have to go through in life and work out our own salvation and create this likeness of him in us, this process, like the refiner's fire of purifying us in that sense. That in 1 John 3:2, it gives us the completion of that perhaps John was thinking back to this statement in Genesis when he talked about seeing that to the fullness. When we see him, when we've resurrected,
be like him.
Yeah, we're going to be like him at that point. So there's going to come a day when we will be like him. And I'm looking at my notes here, but going into chapter 5, he says, so now we have this statement, though, that we're made in the likeness of him, because he's talking about the genealogy from Adam on down to Noah, the 10 names. And this was what he said about this. He said that chapter starts off with that this is the book of Adam. This is the book of his genealogy in these 12 names. And it's talking about it in the past tense so that it can show us a fact that there's an outcome that's going to be certain, in the sense that we can know that there's a past tense of something, but yet see the reflection of it into the future, like Yeshua being told that he was slain from the foundation of the earth, and yet we know crucifixion was a specific time within the history of man, but yet it was formed and done at the creation or the foundation of the earth. How can those two things tie together? So in this aspect of us being created in the likeness of God, using this book, this genealogy, that God knew the plan, and he spells out the plan of how he's going to achieve this and getting us into his likeness by giving us these 10 names and genealogy, and then for us to search out what the meaning of those names mean. And there's a sentence, there's a structure there.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're going to read what those names mean?
If you know it, I've got it, but you may do a better job.
No, go ahead. I know it, but go ahead.
And he says, using this list, that Adam being man, Seth being appointed, Enosh being mortal or subject to death, Kenan being sorrow or lamenting, and I won't Mahalalel.
Mahalalel, yeah.
Okay. The blessed God, or from the praise of God. Jared shall come down, or one who descends. Enoch meaning teaching or learning or obedience. Methuselah meaning his death shall bring. Lamech meaning the despairing, and Noah meaning rest or comfort. That it would read to us that God gave us his whole plan of bringing us into his likeness was that through man, appointed subject to death, through sorrow, from the praise of God, one who will descend, teaching us and learning obedience, his death shall bring the despairing rest or comfort.
Right. The first person I ever heard share that was Chuck Missler, probably about 25, 30 years ago. But yeah, just a couple of things. You know, Zelem, it's also the Hebrew word for a photograph. So if you have a photo, it's Zelem in Hebrew. So it's an image. And so the idea is it's a reflection. It's not necessarily the original, so to speak, because he would be the original, right? But he created man that in mankind you see a reflection of the Creator. He's spirit. He's not flesh and bone like we are, but you see a reflection of him in that regard. And then, of course, Talmud is alluding to the blood, because the life of all flesh is where? It's in the blood. So when he breathed the breath of life into Adam, insinuated in that statement is what? He breathed the blood into him as well. Because where do we typically get our blood from? It's usually, this is my understanding anyway, it's passed down through the Father. So yeah, you get the concept that in mankind we will see a reflection of the Creator. Of course, that's just before the fall. After the fall, what do we see? Seth is made in the image and likeness of Adam. He is Ben Adam. He is son of Adam, not son of God, as Adam is referred to in Luke's genealogy. Okay, which is why we had to be born again, so that son of man would become son of God. That's why it hasn't been revealed to us what we shall be, but when we see him, we will be like him, for we shall see him as he is. That's why we're being conformed to the image of the Son of God. First message I ever did in my life back in DeLand, Florida, was called The Life's in the Blood. And the whole idea is that when we are born again, I personally believe that something happens in our DNA. I think that there is something literal, tangible that happens in our blood, because in Psalm it says, precious shall their blood be in his sight. Why is blood so important in God's economy as it relates to redemption and to being restored and these kinds of things? Because that's where the life is. And if you start thinking about life as opposed to existing, it has to do with his breath. And so, wow, it makes your head spin sometimes. But in man, we were to see a reflection of the Creator. And we were to function in some ways according to the attributes of the Creator, because his breath was in us, his blood was in us. And then, of course, the fall means that the Lamb is slain from the foundation of the world, because he knew it was going to happen. So he just shared with us those 10 names in the genealogy from Adam to Noah, how the Creator already had planned this. The Lamb is slain from the foundation of the world, but the Word had to become flesh. Why? Because if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Because I and the Father are one. That's what the first Adam was supposed to be. That's what that last Adam was. And when we see him, guess what? That's what we will be. So anyway, let's go to this side of the room. Anyone over here? Right here in front, Barry. All the way from Syracuse.
Amen. Okay, basic question from Genesis 1. When God creates the vegetation, he has to put in soil. Where did the soil come from? Because that would suggest other vegetation before it that died and went into the ground, and is a cycle.
Okay.
So the vegetation had to be planted in soil. Where did the soil come from?
Okay. Are you asking me?
That's basically it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, it does not say that he created vegetation. It said he called it forth. On day 3 of creation, he called forth the grass, the herb-yielding seed, the trees that bear fruit whose seed is in itself after its own kind. So that would imply that the seed for all that had been planted in the soil at some point. All right, when was that created? It says in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So my opinion is he spoke those things into existence. Initially, what we call the earth, which would include the soil of the earth, was submersed beneath the abyss or the deep, the tehom it's called. So it does not explain to us in great detail how he did that.
Right.
You know, he, in the creation account, and this is something we've been dealing with on Wednesday, not so much the how he did it, but the why he did it. You know, the purpose of it, not necessarily what it looks like. So to answer where did the soil come from, he created it. How did he do it? I have no idea. Okay? But I do believe this, that the seed for all that vegetation was sown, so to speak, in the beginning when God created the heavens and the earth, when he created all of the, for lack of a better term, building blocks of creation. And then all those things took shape and took form as he was speaking these things. Let there be light. Let there be a firmament. Let me go off on a little tangent here for just a second. There is a belief that when the Creator spoke the worlds into existence, that he spoke in Hebrew. Personally, I don't have a problem with that belief, because that's the language that he decided to give us his word in, at least initially. So let's just pretend, or let's just assume that that's accurate, that he spoke in Hebrew. Not necessarily modern Hebrew, but in the Hebrew that we have biblically. And so the tradition is, or the idea is, that if he spoke in Hebrew, that even when we go to read the Torah, not only are the words there for a reason in that particular place, but even the letters are there in that particular place for a certain reason, because the letters of the Hebrew language are like building blocks. It's like the elements, you know, I didn't pay attention in this class, but in chemistry, you know, you have the elemental table, you know, is that what they call it? The table, periodic, whatever they call it. All that stuff that makes stuff, you know. As you can see, I did well in chemistry. Anyhow, but so you've got, what is it? H2O is water, right? But if it's either if you take one hydrogen atom away and you add one of the other, the oxygen, instead of have water, you have some kind of poisonous gas. And probably I shouldn't have gone down this road.
Should I go get
What, H2O2? Okay, so if you add one more of the oxygen molecules, you end up with something else, right? And what is it? Hydrogen peroxide, which is not good, as I understand it, or can be potentially dangerous. Is that right? Yes. All right. Oh, that's that what they use to bleach their hair? Okay, so imagine what that would do to my gut, right? The point is you can change one little thing and it becomes something else. All right, so go into Hebrew class. Remember this one, guys? We take Aleph, Chet, Dalet. It's Echad, which means he is one. But if we take that little extension away from the Dalet and make it a Resh, it becomes Aleph, Chet, Resh, which is Acher, which means what? Another. So with just that little bit of a change, you can go from the Lord is one to the Lord is another. So the point here is, if he did use the Hebrew language to speak the worlds into existence, he used those Hebrew letters in the words, they believe that it's like those little things that we take this molecule here, we put it with this molecule, and it becomes this. And so that when he would use these certain words in Hebrew, put them together in a certain way, it actually, you know, manifests in some way. Now, I'm not saying I'm an advocate or an opponent of that. It's just something very interesting. But that how he created everything in the beginning, and then from everything he created, the earth, the waters, the vegetation, everything else began to take shape. Anyone else? Yes, Gary's got something. Wait a minute. No. Got to use the microphone, Gary. We got to see what your fan club is out there.
Real loud.
I know, but those people out there in Montana won't be able to hear you.
I got a lot of things, but we probably won't be able to cover. The first thing, going back to building off a couple of the others, is in chapter 2, Onkelos, when it speaks of God breathing into Adam's nostrils the breath of life, he adds the fact that man became a speaking spirit.
Yeah.
So, that being said, the idea that we're made in the image of God, it has a lot to do with man's capabilities. He's able to reason, he's able to speak, and he has the capacity of holiness. The animals don't have that at all. And I really think if we go to the dietary laws, at the end of the dietary laws, God says, you're to be holy because I'm holy. It's about holiness. Animals eat anything and everything. I once read a Dear Abby article of a guy that was having some relationship problems with multiple women and asked for Abby's advice, but he said, don't give me any kind of moral or religious stuff. She told him to go consult a veterinarian.
Selah.
I thought it was rather humorous myself.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
But, in chapter 2, and of course I know some of the scholars of higher criticism make some things out of something that don't make any sense at all, as you say, that sometimes common sense is
Not so common.
not so common. And the fact that we see the 4-letter name first introduced in chapter 2, not chapter 1. But chapter 2 begins you might say, deals specifically with God's relationship to man. And the fact that God has a personal name shows that he's relational.
Yeah.
And that he not only put Adam there to work, but to have a relationship.
I'm sorry. I want to just interject something real quick.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that's what the work that Adam was given to do was all about. It wasn't about going out and toiling in order to eat bread. That's after the fall. It's about doing the work in that sanctuary, if I can use that word, as it relates to this relationship between man and God and man. So anyway, not to interrupt, but just...
And then, of course, there's ideas of guarding that relationship. And I'm trying to bring us into the fact of, what you spoke earlier today is many times women are better at guarding the relationship than the man is, to some degree. And funny, at the first, well, we won't go there with Adam and Eve and what happened, who ate first and what.
Who did what? Okay.
But no, it seems to be that women are more relationship oriented than men. Well, like you said, we've got work down really good, but we kind of stink sometimes. At least.
Yes, we do. Yes, you're right. Go ahead and you can say it.
When it comes to relationship.
Yeah.
And it's something that we struggle with a lot. So I just thought that was a little bit interesting how chapter 2 shifts from a focus of a general view of the heaven and earth, but it begins to focus more on man. It hones in on man and God's relationship, what our purpose really is. The second thing I really wanted to bring up, but it's rather long, and I wish you would bear with me for a minute, is Cain and Abel's offering.
Okay.
If I can,
Sure.
if I may. I know it's traditionally been the opinion that Abel brought a better offering in the sense of he brought a blood offering versus what Cain brought as the fruit of the ground. And I don't want to at all belittle the idea of the person work of Messiah on our behalf. But I think we have to be careful when we weigh these things out, because not all offerings dealt with sin to begin with. And this one here mentions that it's at the end of days. And, you know, based on context in an agricultural society, that would probably put it somewhere around the time of Sukkot. Albeit that Targum Jonathan says it's Passover. Why? I don't know.
Just let me interject something. Targum,
The
Aramaic translation of the Hebrew Scriptures.
which are more of a paraphrase.
Right.
But there's a few questions and observations I have on this, and one of them is the Hebrew says minkah regarding both offerings. And yet we look at the term minkah as it's used throughout the Scriptures. It has a really wide range of meaning. And one of those meanings can mean tribute. Well, prophetically speaking, Sukkot has the theme of mankind recognizing God as the great king and bringing tribute to him. That's what we see at the end of Zechariah.
Okay.
And so forth. And in my mind, it seems to be contextually here that it's not dealing with blood sacrifices. A few reasons. Number one is that we see God continuing to have a relationship with man after sin entered. The relationship was severed, but we actually see it continuing on. Could this be a hint to begin with that sin had been already dealt with, at least from God's perspective? The lamb slain before the foundation of the world. God
I'll have to ponder that.
Huh?
I'll have to ponder that.
Just a few other things real quick. Number one is the Septuagint, the Greek translation, actually uses two different words concerning Cain and Abel's offerings. And you actually see the writer of Hebrews using those. And the one offering, speaking of Cain's offering, is just a offering, a general offering. Abel's offering is a gift or a tribute, usually something that would be presented to a dignitary or a benefactor. So the Septuagint distinguishes between the two. And of course, we know that Abel brought of the first fruits. It never says anything about Cain. All this language is language of Sukkot.
Okay.
And Sukkot itself is a festival where mankind sin's been dealt with. Mankind's reconciled to his Creator, and the ultimate goal or end of that is peace, shalom, the two dwelling together eternally. So, I don't really see this as an argument about a blood sacrifice as being superior in this case.
Okay. Well, first of all,
Oh, I do have one other question. If Abel brought multiple offerings, it's like it says in Hebrews, it uses plural.
right?
As though he brought one from a mincha offering, a grain offering, and an animal offering. Well, if he was a shepherd, which that's what the text says his occupation is, where did he get a grain offering from?
Well, the second part of that question, I don't know. I wasn't there. So, but just going back to the overall, issue. Just because one way of looking at it might be right doesn't mean the other one's wrong necessarily. So, like when you talk about this happened at the end of days, Miketz Yamim, So it happened at the end of days. It could allude to the end of the season, like you're talking about, in an agrarian society, the end of the season, the growing season, which Sukkot is the feast of the ingathering, right? So one way I've always looked at that is that it is speaking, of the end of days and the feast of the ingathering and all the symbolism of the king and all the nations coming up, et cetera, et cetera. But wouldn't you agree that regardless of what the sacrifice is about, it must be acceptable? Whether it's for sin or it's a trespass offering, or whether it's an asham of, any of those, or a peace offering, right? It has to be an acceptable offering, right? Right, regardless of what the issue is. Right, it's got to be without blemish. Therefore, it has to be holy and acceptable unto the Lord. So, for me, as far as what time, specifically what the mincha is supposed to mean there, to me, the issue seems to be the difference between what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable, and the fact that the Hebrew text speaks of Cain brought his mincha. Havel brought his mincha. Whether one was a grain offering and whether one was a tribute, I don't know specifically, and I won't be so bold as to be dogmatic about it. But I do believe adamantly the issue is Cain, what he brought was unacceptable. And that's very, very clear in the text, right? So then that leads me to, first the look, and he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, not instead brought, he also brought, which speaks to me of, it does speak of the blood of the lamb, not necessarily the issue is not necessarily here one of, was it supposed to be a blood offering or was it supposed to be a mincha offering? The issue is, was it an acceptable offering or an unacceptable offering? So I relate it here to you and me. I'm supposed to be a living sacrifice. I present my body as a living sacrifice. All right, holy and acceptable unto the Lord. I know that in and of myself, what I can do within my own power is not going to measure up. Would you agree with that? As short of His Spirit, His presence, Him working in me, anything that I can work up in and of myself is not going to meet the standards. So I've always looked at this as, this is a hint that in Messiah, it's not my righteousness that I present before Him, it's His righteousness that I come into His presence. And that is what makes those things that we offer, whether it be tribute, whether it be a grain offering, what have you, that's what makes it acceptable unto Him. Everything has to be done in His order, according to His protocol. But where you and I are concerned, where humanity is concerned at large, we have to come before Him not in our own righteousness, but in His righteousness. So, to me, like I said, just because one might be right doesn't mean the other isn't right too, because that's, in Hebrew thinking, what is the old saying? You can have 3 rabbis and 5 opinions, and they may all have some merit of validity to them all. So I'm not negating anything you said. I'm just telling you how I've always viewed it. So the Sukkot issue, I think, is there's probably a lot of truth to that. But I'm looking at it from the angle of at the end of days, you know, how is it that I'm going to get to present an offering unto the King? It's not because I was this or I did that. It's going to be because the Lamb is slain from the foundation of the world, and I recognize that. And so he's called righteous Abel by the Messiah himself. And to me, that kind of connects the two, you know, the idea that our righteousness, that we can present an acceptable offering to the Creator, is because of his righteousness. So, and there are, you know, like you, I've seen other different interpretations of what this was and what that was. And I won't, as I said, be so dogmatic as to, you know, by golly, this is the way it is. But I do have a very strong opinion, though, that it's the blood of the Messiah atoning for us, and his righteousness, not my own, is how the Father receives that I offer him. And that's what makes it acceptable. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Well, a lot of what has been being said here relates back to the heart and the way I'm hearing it. And this sounds out of context, but, you know, in Matthew 5:17, when Messiah said, I didn't come to destroy the law or the prophets, I came to, I'm paraphrasing, but to fulfill. Quite a while back, as I was just studying, I thought, well, how did he fulfill it? And I've heard numerous teachings on that, and I have numerous ideas. But Father put it inside of me that one way he fulfilled everything was by living out the will of God from his heart. From his heart. You know, he said, well, anyway, I'll leave it right at that. Yeshua only did what Father told him. He only did what the Father, you know, what was in his heart, that through the Spirit. And like in Deuteronomy 5:29, it says, oh, that they had a heart in them, that they would fear me and always keep my commandments, that it might be well with them and with their children forever. So, oh, that they had a heart in him. And so when he talked about the blemish here in the offering, when we sacrifice, when we give the, let's say, sacrifice of praise or crucify our flesh, if our heart's not in it, or going back to the marriage concept, if our heart's not in it, going to honoring God, if our heart's not in it, none of it's going to be acceptable. It's not going to come out to, see, when Father gave us his, and I could say law, but I'm going to say loving instructions, because that's how it's in my heart. When he gave us his loving instructions, he was pouring his heart out for us. He just wants people, a bride, that responds to him from their heart. That's how I see all this.
Well, speaking of Cain, obviously, as it turns out, his heart wasn't quite right. So it's possible that beyond the sacrifices, really, what the Father was looking on was the condition of Cain's heart versus the condition of Abel's heart. And so the other is just, trappings, maybe you'd say, because, it becomes obvious that Cain's heart is filled with jealousy and rage and murder and all the attributes of the adversary, which, later on, in 1 John, I think it's in chapter 3, where you were reading a little bit ago, it's in 1 John where he talks about that this is how you distinguish the children of God from the children of the adversary. Where his children, that is God's children, are concerned, his seed is in them, which is his word. Where is it in us? It's in our heart. I've hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. As it was with Cain, well, there was a different word, a different seed in his heart. He displayed and exhibited the attributes of the adversary. The adversary is the father of lies. He's a murderer from the beginning. The first person on record to be a murderer is Cain. First person to lie that's on record is Cain. I mean, Adam didn't lie. The woman you gave me, she gave me the fruit and I ate it. It's true, you know. Where are you? I was hiding and made some fig leaves and covered up my nakedness because we didn't want to be ashamed. Well, he was telling the truth, you know. I mean, yeah, he had sinned, but he wasn't lying. Cain was the first recorded liar. I would even argue that Cain's the first recorded robber because he took something that didn't belong to him away. That is Abel's life. So anyway, I said all that to say that the issue may just simply have been that the Creator saw the condition of Cain's heart, and that's what made his mincha unacceptable, as opposed to the condition of Abel's heart, and that's why he accepted his mincha. That's why, presumably, he accepted the firstlings of his flock as well. I want to say one other thing, and I know you want to add something here, but it's related in my mind, and that is when Yeshua talks about when you bring your gift and you remember you have aught against your brother, what are we to do? Leave it. Go reconcile with your brother, then come back and offer your gift, which would imply what? That if you didn't do that, would your gift be acceptable? No. Okay, so it's about the condition of the heart. Yeah. Yes, sir. You wanted to add something?
Well, I had a little note here. When it said till the ground, there's no official Hebraic connection there, but I think it's in Isaiah, one of the prophets, where he says, break up the fallow ground of your heart. Mm-hmm. You know, and so till the ground from Genesis 2, 4 or 7, whatever it was there. You said that's what, with Cain and Abel, that's what he's going to judge the offering on, the condition of the heart. That's what he's going to judge all of us on in the end. It's going to be the same, the condition of our heart, largely. I mean,
well, okay, let's go with that. Adam is going to till the ground, breaking up this hardened ground. Why? So that it can receive seed. Yeah. Aren't we supposed to? That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be producing fruit, because in the fruit is the seed. Well, the seed's got to fall on good ground. So we are also challenged with the task of being those that he uses to break up that hardened ground in the lives of our family members, our friends, our neighbors. You know, we need some help. We need it to rain, right? But we've got to be there to complement what the Creator is doing. You know, we don't know what's going on in somebody's life at any given moment. We can meet somebody on the street. We have no idea what's been going on. We don't know what's going on in their head. We don't know what's going on in their heart. And we just encounter them and strike up a conversation, and we just start talking about things that really matter, eternal things. And then in the course of that conversation, you say one thing that connects, because that resonates within them, because that's what they've been dealing with, or that's what they've been, processing in their spirit for weeks, months. And you say that one thing, and you play a role in, or you contribute and cooperate with what the Father is doing in that person, breaking up the ground. He's causing it to rain, and you plant a seed. That's what Adam was, that's the whole pattern there, is the Creator had initiated things. Now he said, I want you to finish the work. I want you to cooperate with me in doing this. And that's what we're doing when we are His witnesses, when we are being witnesses of the resurrected Messiah. We're going out and scattering seeds too. And some of it falls on the wayside, it gets snatched up. Some of it falls among the thorns and thistles, and it gets choked out by the cares of life. Some falls on the stony ground, it comes up real quick. But you never know where you're going to find good ground. And that's why we have to be, those who are, the condition of our heart needs to be that we can hear Him, those soft little whisperings of things to say, things to do, because you never know, it might make the difference in someone's life. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to add a quick note to that about Cain's heart. In chapter 4, verse 5, it said Cain was very angry. Mm-hmm. He was angry really at God because God had not accepted his offering. So again, that's just to me another big clue as to the condition of his heart. Agreed. And he was angry because he couldn't do things the way he wanted to do it.
He wanted to be able to do it how he saw fit, and then when it was unacceptable to the Creator, he got mad. And then he took it out on somebody else. That just described the world. The world wants to do what it wants to do, wants God to be okay with it. Doesn't want there to be any consequence for it. And then when he doesn't accept that, then the world takes it out on those who are trying to do things the way the Creator instructs us to do it. That's the whole thing with the world in Israel, with the world in God's people. That's why they hated me. That's why they're going to hate you. Don't think they're going to like you. If they like you, you're doing it wrong. Right? All right. Did I see another hand over here? Yes. Howard. Howard? Howard.
I'm out of my comfort zone here.
You know what? In 20 years, I've heard this man speak like, a paragraph. Anyway, go ahead.
If that much, yeah.
He's the silent Beatle. No, I'm saying.
That's it. The word in the second chapter of Genesis for formed, Yatsar.
Yatsar?
You pointed out that it had the unique spelling of having two yods together. And so being that yod is a symbol or a letter for hand, the image that comes to my mind is that God used both hands to form Adam. So do you have any thoughts kind of like that on that?
Well, let me take that and couple it with what you just handed me. Yeah. The lump of clay. So I'm coming out of the back room here, and she walks, she says, I have a gift for you. I guess it's okay if I tell this. And I had to stick out my right hand, and she dropped a lump of clay in my hand. Because she's a potter. All right? So let me ask the potter. Would it be logical to assume that if you got a lump of clay, that many times you're going to have to use both hands?
Both hands, and prophetically there's pressure.
Hold on, let's get this on the mic, okay?
Yeah, when you're a potter, it's just an awesome revelation of getting to know the potter. But the Lord showed me when you have a lump of clay and you are forming it on a wheel, you slap that clay on that wheel and it starts spinning. And you bring pressure from above, aka righteousness, pressure from the side, aka justice, and together you bring it into center. And then you put your thumb down the very center to the very core of that clay and begin pulling it out. So yes, two hands are used. I'm sure there is a one-handed potter, but I am not. And I believe the Lord is not either,
So, excellent observation, Mr. Dahl. Both hands. So, and so here's something else you said that, just take it for what it's worth. It's on the wheel. It's going around in cycles. He leads us in cycles of righteousness, it says. We read it as paths of righteousness. But the Hebrew word literally means a circular motion, a cycle. So he's taking us around and around and around. And as he leads us in those cycles of righteousness, he's taking both hands, right? Mm-hmm. One up here and one to the side, and shaping and molding us into who he wants us to be. Zod is that word.
Mm-hmm. To conform it into what's in his heart.
Yeah.
What's in the heart of the potter. And you don't let the clay push you around. You push. You conform the clay.
When I've been in places where they were, a potter was doing something, isn't there a critical need for water?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And yeah, the content of the clay is the flexibility. There's so much to share about the clay, but water is an important element as to the plasticity. There are some potters that use a lot of water, some use a little bit of water, but the content of the clay, if you have very dry clay, it's very hard to conform. You know, it's very hard to work with, and it has to be, you add water to make it come together, but then it also has to do the condition of the content of the clay. There's you can increase the plasticity by the chemicals that are in the clay, but water's very important, not only in the forming of the clay into a mass to work with, but also in applying the water in the forming of it, if you're using it in a wheel and so forth.
So, in other words, depending on the clay, the potter may have to deal with this lump of clay a little differently than he deals with this lump of clay.
Absolutely.
Because this clay might be a little drier than this, and so he has to deal with this a little differently than that one. So he's not going to deal with them all exactly the same way.
No.
Is anybody hearing what I'm saying right
Yes.
now?
Yes.
Okay. So let's keep that in mind. Yeah, they like that too back there, okay? And since we're on this subject, once you've shaped it, is it not true that you have to fire it?
Yes, and so I was just really, I've been pondering what you were talking about, clay versus ashes. Clay, when it is fired, in order to, so it doesn't dissolve, it goes into the fire, and it's very hard, and it's not going to turn into ashes. But for clay to turn into ashes, it has to be turned into something living. I would say it would have to have some blood, some life.
So he takes us, he molds and shapes us. He determines what we need in order, depending on our variety of clay. He determines what we need in order to shape us and to mold us into the vessel that he's envisioned, that he's ordained. And then when he's shaped and molded it, then he puts it in the fire, because when you take it out of the fire, it's going to be something that lasts.
Well, to begin with, that you form the clay, but then there's a drying out period time before you put it into the fire. And that's just the first firing. It can have multiple firings. Woohoo!
A bunch of tests, right?
Yeah. And then, yeah, it's so much fun.
Well, I didn't know we had a potter in the house, but that's very interesting. It's always intrigued me, Do we have any questions online? Okay, related questions? Okay, let's get the mic up to Robert. I'm going to take a couple online, folks, and then we're going to kind of be winding it down for the day.
All right. The first one was regarding men being leaders. From Mary Sheets, how does a man become a spiritual leader when he had no mentors growing up to show him how, and he's always been a follower?
Well, the first part of the question, I didn't have any mentors. I'm not saying I am one. I'm just saying I didn't have any. I want to make sure I say this the right way. I'm not trying to sound super spiritual or anything, but in my heart, most what I've learned through him, leading me and guiding me. Yes, there have been other people who've spoken into my life. There have been people who've given me good counsel. Sometimes people who've given me some not so good counsel. But most everything I've learned as it relates to what I'm doing right now has been through the experience of God leading and directing, and then taking the things that I've learned as a husband and father, and trying to navigate that and then applying it here. As it relates to always being a follower, I think that a lot of us, I won't say all, but I think a lot of us, that's our default position, And so Because to be a leader, so to speak, means you do have to get out of your comfort zone. It means you have to take on more responsibility. And I think that, and I'm not saying for all, but for some, that's just too great a price to pay. So all of us have been followers. And again, I think that's our default position. How do you become a leader? You have to crawl up on the altar and say, I'm going to empty myself. I'm going to be just empty of what I want, and you put in me what you want. I mean, I realize that sounds cliche and maybe for some abstract, but I don't know how else to see it. When I was in the 9th grade, I wouldn't look you in the eye and talk to you. I looked at the floor. If a girl spoke to me, I would literally run. I would run away, and I'm not exaggerating. And I was sheepish. I would sit in the corner. I wouldn't say anything. I wouldn't do anything. I just wanted to go through life unnoticed. That was my goal. Just let me get through high school and, unnoticed. But God, if God has purpose, and He has purpose for us all, if we will pay attention, He will put things in our lives that will transform us from being that follower, so to speak, into the leader that He wants us to be, whether it's a husband, whether it's a pastor, what have you. But we've got to be willing to get out of our comfort zone to do that. I don't think He waves a magic wand and turns a follower into a leader. The person has to realize, I'm weak here. I need to overcome this. The person has to realize, I need to strive for that. And God, if you'll lead and direct me, then I can do all things through the Messiah who strengthens me. So I don't think there's a check 1 and step 2 and step 3. You genuinely have to be guided by the Spirit of God. I don't know how else to answer that question. Yeah. Yeah. Continue.
On that line, because what you were saying about being a follower versus being a leader, this came to mind while you were speaking. For Nayla and I, our daughters have all had a quinceañera, which is a ceremonial kind of thing when they come of age. And one of the steps in that is that they have their shoes removed. Their flat shoes are removed, and they're replaced with high heels. And the reason they're replaced is because it's to tell them, you are a leader now. You may not want to be, but someone's following you, and you have that responsibility. So I think in many ways that's something we all need to realize is somebody's following us.
That's true. That's true. And you saying that prompts this. Maybe everybody's supposed to be a follower for a season so that they can learn how to be a leader.
Yes.
And by follower, obviously we're talking about following Him, which is to say we're to be servants first, because you got to serve if you want to lead. And even when you're leading, you have to serve. Well, we won't get off into all of that, but
okay.
Continue.
From Paul and Lori Normandeau, Genesis 2:7 in the ISR Bible version states that Yud-He Vav-He breathed into Adam's nostrils breath of lives, plural. Did He breathe both physical and spiritual life into Adam?
Let me get over there real quick. All right, now repeat that last part of the question. I'm sorry.
He breathed into his nostrils the breath of lives, plural. So did He breathe both physical and spiritual life into Adam?
Okay, the word is chaim. It is technically, grammatically, it's plural. I think that when He breathed the breath of life into him, it wasn't that He was just causing him to exist. It was that He was giving him everything he needed in order to live, and by that I mean eternally. So if you want to break that into natural and spiritual, if that's the way to look at it, then yeah, I believe that. It was more than just breathing existence into him. He breathed the existence into the animals, but He breathed the breath of life into mankind so that we become a living nephesh, a living soul. So, I guess that we could look at it that way. Any more online? If not, that's fine, but I just wanted to give people online an opportunity.
Yeah, and I wanted to make sure if I had any on Facebook. Okay, I'm going to give you both of these questions at the same time. From Lucy, is the paradise the same? Is the garden and the paradise the same? And the second one is also referring to the garden from Patrick Lawson. Do you have an opinion of what kinds of trees the tree of life and the tree of knowledge and good and evil were?
All right, let me answer the last question first. No. I do not have an opinion. As far as paradise and the garden, it is my understanding that our English word paradise comes from a Persian word that means paradise. And it's related to paradise being an enclosed space. So, Gan is the word that is translated from Hebrew to English as garden, Gan. And Gan is an enclosed space. So, I kind of feel that paradise, whatever we envision there, is really what the garden was. It was that enclosed space that was set apart. This is where the Creator walked, and this is where He appointed Adam to walk with Him, to commune with Him, I believe, as in functioning in the role of the priest, to minister to Him. And last time I brought this up, I got into a lot of trouble, but also to all those other people that were out there. And we'll just leave it hanging right there. But yeah, I think that the garden, I think we're going back to the garden. I'll put it that way. I think we're returning back to the garden. We're returning to Eden. You know, I think that's what the New Jerusalem is. It's the garden being returned back to earth, and God dwells among men. So, yes, I believe that they are one and the same. I guess it's going to depend here now on what you envision paradise to be. That's the variable that I can't really nail down for you. Any more that were online, Robert?
Yeah, there's actually there's a few of them that kind of.
Well, let's do one. Let's do one more because we're closing in on
There's
5.
a few of them that kind of go around the same thing. So I'm going to read the one that kind of encapsulates what a lot of them are asking about, because they're asking how does it relate to men, how does it relate to women as far as being the priest of the home. And the question that kind of brings it all about is, are there any action items to do that?
Are there any what?
Action items.
Action items.
When I hear that, I think of, is there a checklist on what I need to do to be the priest
okay.
of my home?
How do you do it? All right. No, I don't think there's a step-by-step. I don't think there's a handbook on how you do this. You know, that I think we kind of alluded to that a little bit ago. Long time ago, I did a message. It was called Follow the Man with Scars. And the basic premise of that message was this. If I'm going to go into battle, and I'm going to follow someone into battle, I don't want to follow the guy that just got out of boot camp. I want to look for the guy who has battle scars, and he's still walking, and he still has the courage to face the enemy and to walk into the line of fire. That's the kind of guy that I want to look for. All right? So how do you teach somebody that? You don't. You learn that, right? You learn that under fire. You learn that through experience. I mean, and I've never been to war, you know, but there's some men here who have. But that's the, you know, if I'm going to go into that kind of a situation, that's the guy I'm going to be looking for, because that's the guy who's faced the enemy down before. He's lived through it. He's got the scars to prove it. And ultimately, the message was this: Yeshua has the scars. All right? He's got the scars. He faced it. He overcame it. And so he's the one I want to follow. So you follow the guy who's got the scars because he's lived through all those situations. And that's the kind of guy that you can trust when everything gets hot. So, and I just don't think they print a handbook for that. I should probably have somebody else come up here and relate this to you, but here is how I see it. You know, looking at it in a military context or, a soldier's life. There's all these guys and now women that go through training. But would it be fair, Robert, to say that you really don't know what those guys are going to do until the bullets start flying? Well, it's the same with us. We don't really know what we're going to do until the bullets start flying. So there's no step by step to learn how to do that. You know, where it comes to husband and wife, I'll go back to something I said earlier, and that is if you, as a husband and as a father, if you want to assess and kind of evaluate where you are in terms of success, look in your wife's face. Look at your children, because that'll give you a good idea. Because that'll be a reflection of you. And if she don't look happy with you, it might be because there's something to be unhappy about. Now, I'm not giving women a free pass on everything. You know, this works both ways. But he didn't go to the woman and say, why did you eat that fruit? First, he went to the man. Why? Because he was the one responsible. Why? Why did you do that? Who told you you were naked? Did you eat from the tree I told you not to eat from? Yeah, he dealt with the woman and he dealt with the serpent. But he comes to the man because it's his responsibility, regardless. So, anyway, again, you can't teach that. You have to learn that. You have to be Spirit-led in how to walk in that. So with all that being said, it's 5 o'clock. I'm tired. It's been a good day. All right? It's been a good day. And we just came out of the season of our joy, and I want to continue to rejoice. Right? Still in it. All right? Adam, brother, I want you to close this out in prayer, okay? If you will, sir. Just grab the mic from William there.
Lord, we just thank you for this time together, and I just pray that we just all can take something from this day, and just pray that you would just bless this week and bless everyone traveling, Father. I pray you put your protection upon everyone here and everyone on stream, and just pray for many, many more days and Shabbats like this one. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Blessings, everyone. Shalom. You don't have to leave and go anywhere. We don't have to move our cars either.